Hey, what's up? It's the Field with Preston Hiefield. Thank you all so much for listening, liking, and subscribing on YouTube, Substack, Apple, and Spotify. Here on a Tuesday, May 12th, 2026. Wanted to hop on and give some takes on the AFCA vote that came out, as reported by Yahoo's Ross Dellinger last week, about expanding the college football playoff to potentially 24 teams. The exact quote was maximizing the number of participants. Just wanted to dive into what a 24-team field would mean. Would a 16-team field be better? What I think kind of the angle is behind the people on the AFCA. Again, it's certainly not legislation that's put into place. It's just them voting on proposed rule changes, and they don't actually even have the power to change those rules, but there are some people on that committee who are active college football head coaches and commissioners, and I can break that down for you. Dellinger did the reporting. Really good job. Also wanted to give kind of my take on, I'm very open-minded with what to do about the transfer portal window. Currently, it's January 2nd through the 16th. Obviously, there were massive issues with that last year for a variety of reasons, which I will go into. The two teams who make the Natty do get an extra 5-day window. All the players get an extra 5-day window to enter the portal. Still an issue, and even for the coaches who are staying with the team, still an issue on how to exactly build their roster. I know that they have all of those conversations in December prior to bowl prep. That being said, it still makes it pretty difficult. I do think there are two different ways to do that. Number one, you can move the schedule back deeper into August, start the season a little earlier, and the season around January 1st. Or why not just have the transfer portal window in June? After spring ball, when everyone truly knows where they stand going into the next college football season. To me, that actually makes the most sense. But wanted to go into that just a little bit and just have some fun with it again as well. Nothing to be too worked up about. And then what was the other topic? Oh, yeah, Fox released their college football Friday night schedules, which have been basically beefed up in recent years. You can say what you want about the Fox programming. It is a bummer that the big noon kickoff is at noon, because Michigan and Ohio State should be played at night, not at 9 a.m. I think most people are in unanimous agreement on that, unless you work for Fox. That being said, I do like what they're doing with the Friday night schedule. Again, hate the Saturdays, but do like what they're doing with the Fridays, so want to get into that, and I will kind of break down what the schedule is like on those Friday nights as they put out a press release. So anyways, let's basically get into it. I'll pull up the Ross Dellinger report here, so I can quote it again, just a tremendous college football insider. Quote, "The American Football Coaches Association voted last week to recommend that college leaders implement a playoff with the maximum number of participants, discontinue conference championship games," that's another big one, "preserve the Army-Navy game exclusive window, but also hold other games on that day," which currently does not happen, "and end the playoff by the second week of January." Right now, the Natty this year is going to be January 25th. The semis are the 14th and the 15th. Quarters are December 30th and then New Year's Day. Big reason for that is the Rose Bowl wants to stay on New Year's Day. Huge fan of the Rose Bowl staying on New Year's Day forever. It should never be played on any day other than New Year's Day. With the San Gabriel Mountains in the background, the sun setting as we go into the fourth quarter, it doesn't get more college football than that. Moving the Rose Bowl off of New Year's Day would be, I think you get everyone to agree that would not be ideal. Next year, by the way, the quarters, New Year's Eve and New Year's, again, Rose Bowl will be a quarter, and then the semis, Orange Bowl and Cotton, 13th and the 14th, so the Natty would be 15, 16, 17, January 24th and 28th. So basically, this year's Natty will be on January 25th. The year after that will be January 24th. I believe after that, again, the conference commissioners and certainly the networks run the sport. I think ESPN will renegotiate or redecide on what to do with the Natty window following that. I'll see if Dellinger put it in his report or not. I just want to say there's a lot of moving parts here. To basically discuss what I want to discuss, you have the AFCA Coaches Association. Why are they doing this? Why are they saying we should expand the team to the maximum number of participants, aka 16 or 24? Do you even like it? And, conference championship games, should they go away? So wanted to hit on all of that for starters. On the 24-team playoff, and actually before I even get there, really quickly, just some housekeeping, legislation-wise. Again, the AFCA has truly no power over the future of the sport. That being said, there are people on the board of trustees who discuss these recommendations, and in his reporting, Ross mentioned who those people are. Some of them, active college football head coaches. So Craig Bohl is the executive director, longtime North Dakota State, Wyoming legend, Laramie, Fargo legend. The active coaches who are on this board, man, I think this is actually kind of important. Brett Bielema, Brent Venables, Clark Lee, Rhett Lashley, Joey McGuire, and Pat Fitzgerald. So Brent has made the playoff, lost in the first round with OU to Bama at home. Obviously, Vandy was kind of notoriously not snubbed, but notoriously didn't make it at the buzzer this year. SMU made the playoffs once, got murdered by Penn State in the first round. Texas Tech, great season, won the Big 12, made the playoff, got murdered by Oregon in the quarterfinals in the Orange Bowl. Pat Fitz, new coach at Michigan State, they have not made the playoff recently. I do remember when they made the 14 playoff and Nick Saban and Alabama. I want to say that was like a 35-0, 40-0 win. It was like one of the few shutouts of the CFB era, and that was a absolute throttling. There are also other people who are behind this decision. Notably, according to Ross's reporting, Notre Dame athletic director Pete Pavakwa, and Big 12 and ACC commissioners Brett Yormark and Jim Phillips. All right, my reaction to that is you don't say that the guys who can't really make the playoffs are behind expanding it to 24 teams. They also don't really have the power. Again, the Big 10 and the SEC, it's tough to really remember exactly what the legislation says, but because they have the dollars, they have the power in terms of this decision-making, i.e. if Greg Sankey and Tony Patini don't really want a 24-team playoff, they don't have to. I think that Tony Patini, I think if you're the Big Ten, you are obviously very happy with the way the playoffs going. You've won 3 straight natties. If you're the SEC, man, I think you're fine with it too. I think you'd probably want to eliminate your conference championship game to give your Georgias of the world a better shot at winning the title. But the only thing with that is, according to the reporting, the SEC title game brings in about $50 million in revenue, extra revenue. And on top of that, man, the SEC title game is such a vibe. I've never been, but you watch it on TV every year, and game days there every year in Atlanta. And it is just an amazing vibe with amazing fan bases and NFL players everywhere. And especially, especially pre-NIL world when the SEC clearly had all the talent. Like, it's just such a vibe. And I think to eliminate that, even in the NIL world, I don't want to say it hurts the sport or hurts the product, but man, I think it's something that the SEC can really hang its hat on with, hey, it's kind of there. I mean, it's conference championship day, and of course, everyone watched the Big Ten title game too. Amazing game last year between Indiana and Ohio State and Indy. But it's kind of the SEC's day, and at the least, it's the SEC's morning and then midday when they have game day there, and then all the lead up to the game, and then their games usually kicks off around 3 Eastern, I want to say. It's just a vibe, and so I think it would be unfortunate. Now, if you're the SEC, are you happy that the conference championship game gets eliminated because that's one less way for you to get hurt en route to your attempt at winning a national title? Obviously, famous example, 2 years ago, Carson Beck throws a Hail Mary before halftime, gets his arm absolutely practically torn off by a Texas linebacker. He's out for the season, needs surgery. Gunnar Stockton, good player, turns out to be a really good player, but in that moment, tough for him. He came in and won the game to his credit in the second half against Texas, but then they played a Notre Dame team who, of course, doesn't play in a conference, didn't play in a conference title game, was extremely well rested, didn't have their quarterback's arm severed the week before or 2 weeks before. They're much healthier, and they end up winning that college football playoff quarterfinal game 2 years ago. I think it's tough to argue against that. If you're Kirby Smart, who's won the last 2 SEC titles, by the way, you're probably going, yeah, man, it's not really fun to feel like you're injured or exhausted going into the postseason. It's awesome to win the SEC title. They obviously crushed Bama last year. And then 2 years ago beat Texas, edged Texas out in a late, I believe, overtime game. But it's not really advantageous to your pursuit of a national championship to go all out in the SEC title game in this current 12-team era. Now, remember in the BCS era, the SEC title game was legitimately either the national title game, the de facto national title game, or the de facto national semifinal. Oftentimes, it was pretty clear the two best teams in the country were from the SEC, and the SEC title game was basically for the Natty. Many, many, many times it was. I think there were funny stats out there, like Saban at one point had more Natties than SEC titles or something like that, SEC championship game titles, which would make a lot of sense. Probably the same thing for Georgia too. So, I think in the 12-team era, when you want to be healthy and playing your best ball, does it make a lot of sense to play, if you're number 2 Georgia, to play number 5 Alabama in the SEC title game and then be like, all right, sweet, we won it, but man, a couple players got hurt or a couple players got banged up, and now we still have a 12-team playoff to compete in. It's different when you only have just a national semifinal or just a national title to play in. Like, winning the SEC title meant you were going to play in the national title in the BCS era, which was so awesome. That is what made the SEC title just crack. Now it's like, awesome, you won the SEC, the best conference in America, or number 2, depending on how you look at it, deepest conference for sure, and now you got to play a 12-team playoff. That's tougher. I mean, that's just tougher. I think, you look at Georgia, who's won those last 2 SEC titles, and they've been, obviously, like I mentioned, the famous example of Carson Beck, you lose your quarterback for the season. Like, if you're Oregon, you lose Dante Moore for the year, but you win the Big Ten title. How do you feel about that? Probably not great. And unless you're a big Dylan Raiola fan, who could be a very, very good player. But you get the point. So that's what I see from an SEC perspective. Now, what about a 24-team college football playoff? I'm good. I don't want it, mostly because, I think it would start to diminish the regular season. That was always the thought of a 12-team playoff, not so much a 4-team playoff, but a 12-team playoff. Like, is that going to diminish the regular season? If you can lose in the SEC title game but still make the playoff like Alabama did last year, and won a game, by the way, at Oklahoma, doesn't that kind of diminish the regular season? Kind of. Certainly the conference championship game diminishes it a little bit, like I just went through for the last 5 minutes. But a 24-team playoff, man, like that really starts to feel like, I'm serious. I think you would probably have coaches sit starters. Like, if you're Indiana last year, might be a weird example because that was a historic season for Indiana that they probably wanted to see all the way through. But if you're like Ohio State last year, undefeated going into the Big Ten title game, but it's a 24-team playoff, like, you honestly might consider sitting some players in that game just to be fully healthy for a 24-team run. And even regardless, like, even if you didn't, like, I think it's still in your mind, like, oh man, if you're 8-4, you still might have a chance. Like, I don't know if I love that. Like, I don't think we needed Iowa and Missouri and Illinois in the field last year to understand that Indiana was the best team, or the other teams didn't deserve to be there. Obviously, Oregon, Ohio State, like Alabama, Georgia, those are kind of your juggernauts that you wanted to see. And then you have a couple of teams who kind of come out of nowhere and have wonderful seasons. Texas A&M, an example last year. Like, it would help the Vandy's of the world. Like, did you really need to see Vandy in the playoff last year? Like, even if you go to 16 teams, did you really need to see Vandy in the playoff? I mean, you kind of saw them get absolutely crunched by Texas down the stretch of the regular season. Again, good season, certainly one of the best in the history of Vandy football, and huge shout out to them for that. And Diego Pavia, Heisman finalist, yada, 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 beat Bama. Did you really need to see them in the playoff? Like, to really feel like you were crowning a champion? Probably not. And I would just say, from my perspective, preserving the regular season is a really good move if you're on the administration side of college football. The importance of the regular season is really what makes college football so special. I mean, it's the fan bases, it's the upsets, it's the sheer passion, no doubt about it. The NIL world has certainly fogged some of that, but at the same time, when you turn it on a Saturday, you're not wondering what wide receiver 2 is getting paid for your favorite team. You're just pumped to watch your favorite team. You know what I mean? I mean, there are some haters out there who are like, wow, here's the NIL deal for wide receiver 2, and he only had 2 grabs for 18 yards today. Sweet. But like in general, people who are college football purists or who appreciate the sport at the highest level, like I don't think they're complaining too much about the NIL once the season actually starts. It's just kind of an off-season topic. But the regular season, like a sunny September day, dude, LSU is playing at Ole Miss on September 19th this year. You know how amazing that game is going to be? Obviously, the Kiffin return game. Trinidaddy versus Sam Levitt in Oxford with Kiffin back on the sidelines. That game's going to be pure crack, dude. And, a Bama LSU game meant so much for so long that, like, would the loser of that game be eliminated from the playoff? In a 12-team playoff, probably not, if they're both having great seasons. But in a 24-team playoff, certainly not. And that's kind of a bummer. Like, I just think I think back to the Burrow Tua game where there were 1 million NFL players on the field, 12 NFL receivers, a couple of NFL Pro Bowl, first team all-league type quarterbacks in Burrow and Tua, good defenders as well. Obviously, again, Jets and Jamar and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and all, Thaddeus Moss, all the skill guys that LSU had, and then the 4 great receivers for Bama. Like that game, by the way, that is probably the best. Well, I don't know about best. That is one of the best college football games I've ever seen, period. And it was a regular season game. It was Bama, LSU, at Bama and LSU, and Joe Burrow went in there and won, I think something like 44-41. It was an unbelievable game. And I don't think that you would, look at it in too much of a diminished light if something like that were to happen again. But if it in 2014 playoff, it's not just another game, but it feels closer to just another game. Whereas if you're in the 12-team playoff, man, I mean, the 14 playoff, that game is pure crack because it's basically an elimination game. 12-team playoff, it is still crack. 24-team, you're like, dude, all right, so where does that put LSU or Bama after this loss? Are they above Vandy or below Vandy? All right, they're still getting in. They're 8-4. Anyways, point being, I've hammered it home. I'm not a big fan of the 2014 playoff at all. I would much rather see a 12-team playoff. Candidly, I think I would still rather see a 4-team or an 8-team playoff. I actually think 12 is too much, but 16 and 24 certainly are. And again, to bring that back to my overall point, you have to look at who's arguing for this. And a lot of the coaches on the board are coaches of teams who are good but not great. SMU, I think Oklahoma has a chance to be great, but SMU, Illinois, like Bielema was arguing for it. Of course he's arguing for it because he knows that Illinois doesn't have a real chance at winning the Natty. So just getting into the playoff is a win for that program. And if there are 24 slots available, they can probably finish in the top 25, top 24 and get in. So you have to think about why he's arguing for that. And I personally don't like that. And I hope it doesn't come to fruition. And I do think ultimately the Big Ten and the SEC control most of this. And while the Big 12 and the ACC certainly want expansion, according to Dellinger's reporting, I hope that it doesn't happen because I think keeping and preserving the importance of the regular season is so huge for college football. Okay, the other topic within this, I touched on eliminating conference championship games, and I would also hate for that to happen because I think conference championship games are amazing. I think there's a ton of pride. Like you saw Indiana, Ohio State last year, amazing game. Obviously Bama, Georgia was a little bit of a clunker, but there was still like that SEC pride, and going into it, we didn't know who was going to win. And obviously Bama beat Georgia earlier in the season, so they had the right to be like, yeah, we should be the favorites, or this is at least a coin flip of a game. We beat them earlier in the season. That being said, I understand it from Kirby Smart's perspective of, my God, we got to run through a 12-team playoff after running through the gauntlet of the SEC regular season, after running through the SEC title game. It's a lot different when you just advance to a 14 playoff or just advance straight to a natty. It's basically a play-in game. It was in the 4-team era basically a quarterfinal or a semifinal, and then in the BCS era it was either a semi or a natty, if we're being honest. These days it's not. So I do get that. I just I hope that they can keep it because I still think it's special enough with the 12-team playoff. If it's a 24-team playoff, it's almost like what's the point? Obviously, you're playing for seeding, and pride in the conference title game. But I do think expanding the field I just really hope that doesn't happen. We do not need to see Illinois football ranked number 24 into the playoff. That doesn't do anything for anyone besides Illinois football. So I really hope that doesn't happen. Okay, the other part of this is that the effort to try to end the season by the second week of January is commendable because they're worried about the portal. So right now the portal is currently January 2nd through the 16th, and you have to think about why that's such a massive issue. Number one, you still have a bunch of players playing and a bunch of great players with eligibility left playing, and they're considering staying at their school and re-signing. Trinidad was kind of a famous example last year. You also have the chaos of what about the coaches who the assistants oftentimes get promoted during a magical season run. Indiana is a rare example where their OC Shanahan and their DC Haynes got extended and stayed on. A better example is Oregon. Will Stein last year was the OC of the Oregon Ducks, while also being the head coach of the Kentucky Wildcats, while also needing to recruit in the portal window prior to the college football playoff semifinal, which I believe is on January 9th. So mid-portal, and recruiting even starts before that if you want to be real. Will Stein is like trying to get portal guys for his Kentucky team for 26 and 27, while he's also prepping his offense for a national semifinal against Indiana for the Oregon Ducks in pursuit of their first ever national title in college football. That's not fair. That's messed up. That throws everything off. Tosh Lupoi doing the same thing, literally flying to the Hawaiian Islands to re-recruit JKS, the star quarterback for Cal, and his new team, Tosh's alma mater, and now he's the coach there, while also trying to prepare to stop Fernando Mendoza, Omar Cooper Jr., Elijah Surratt, Charlie Becker, Roman Hemby, all of those guys. That's not fair either. The Curt Cignetti offense. Of course Will Stein had a foot out the door. He was literally GMing his roster. Now he also hired an Oregon assistant to be his new GM. He was literally GMing for the Kentucky Wildcats football team in the crucial portal window, while also needed a new quarterback. Got one, by the way, the Notre Dame kid, I believe. Let me look that up to confirm, but I'm pretty sure they got the Notre Dame kid. And also trying to prepare an Oregon Ducks offense to beat Indiana. Dude, in no world should that happen. Kentucky football starting QB. Yeah, they got Kenny Minchey. They had Zach Calzada last year, named him the starting QB. Cutter Boley ended up taking over. Man, Calzada, what an absolute whirlwind of a career. Beat A&M, beat Bama as a freshman at A&M for Jimbo. What a career. Okay, yeah, they have Kenny Minchey. Yeah, they got Kenny Minchey. They probably paid a lot for Kenny Minchey. Let me look at Kenny Minchey NIL deal. See what we got here. Not publicly disclosed, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, whatever. He was going to go to Nebraska. Now he's at Kentucky. And that article was written January 5th, 2026, which was days before Oregon's game against Indiana that Will Stein was preparing for. He was also recruiting Kenny Minchey to Kentucky. That's insane. That should never happen. And that's kind of my point about the portal window. I get that it's the 2nd to the 16th. I get that you get extensions if you're playing in the game. I still think you have to either move the start of the season back a couple weeks into August. I get that it's hot in a lot of places, but you got to move it back in August, okay? And then therefore end the season earlier around January 1st, more or less. And I was doing an exercise, and the reason I don't like that, I'll say in a second, but I was doing an exercise on how that would actually work this year. So the conference title game is December 5th. So you can't really, kind of like last year, playoff games were 17th, 18th, 19th. And then you have Christmas week, and then you have your first round. Your first round's like 17th, 18th, 19th. Then you have your quarters around New Year's Day. your semis the next weekend, the 9th, and then the Natty the following Monday. The reason that's such an issue is that you have Christmas in there, and then you don't really have a way, like say you moved it back a week, and so the conference title games were Thanksgiving weekend. I also don't like that because Thanksgiving weekend's rivalry weekend, and that rivalry weekend's such an awesome part of college football, and it's even cooler that it's on Thanksgiving. So, I mean, I don't know, man. If you're moving those rivalry games back a week and they're not on Thanksgiving week, and then the next week you have to rush to play conference championship games, like just to end it on January 1st. That's why, and I get why they want to end it earlier, because they want the academic calendar to more or less align. Everyone can laugh if you want, but they want the academic calendar to more or less align with the college football calendar. Another way to say it is we want it to be a one-semester sport, August through December, so that when the kids transfer January 2nd through the 16th, then they basically start with their new program with the new academic semester or quarter in January, and it's an easier transition. And I get that. I totally get that. But here's my proposal. And again, I'm open-minded. If you want to move it back to a couple weeks back in August, again, I actually do think heat is kind of an issue. I don't know if you guys have ever lived in Austin, Texas for a couple of years. It is insanely hot there in August. Like, you can't practice outside. Playing a game outside is borderline dangerous. It's honestly borderline dangerous to play a game in a lot of places outside in August unless you're playing it like at night. Okay. My proposal, just my 2 cents on the portal, is that because everyone's trying to cram everything into December and January, the start of January. It's like such a cram job. Like, oh, Lane Kiffin is going to take the LSU job because he feels like he has to, because he feels like he has to be there in time for the portal to start, and he doesn't know if he's going to coach. If he would have coached at Ole Miss, would he have even been able to dip into the portal? The answer is yes, but would he have been able to dip in the way he wanted to, aka get Sam Leavitt, or would Leavitt have already committed elsewhere? And by the time, if Ole Miss had actually made the Natty, January 20th, 25th, something like that, Leavitt would have been committed elsewhere. It could have gotten really messy. Dude, I just think you're trying to cram too much into December and January right now. There should also be other rules in place, NFL style, such that you can't actually leave as a head coach for another job until the entire season is over. That seems super basic to me. And if you're a university, you also can't interview candidates until after the entire college football season, even the Natty, is over. Makes sense for a million reasons. Not the least of which is, what if one of these in the case of Kiffin, it was obviously he was a head coach, but if you're an assistant, like you're Will Stein, and LSU wanted to hire Will Stein instead, they could have poached him, and Bob, they probably thought about it, honestly, until Kiffin said yes. But okay, so there's just so much cramming, right? So number one, there needs to be that rule in place where coaches aren't allowed to interview and schools aren't allowed to interview coaches for head jobs or for any jobs until after the entire season is over. That should be really easy to accomplish. Not sure why that's not in place yet. Okay, that's number one. Number two, because you have, remember the year Mario left Oregon? He was literally probably his agent, Jimmy Sexton, was probably negotiating a deal, I would seriously say, in October with Miami. Because he started getting asked about it in November, and he was getting cold feet. Remember when Oregon got killed by Utah in early November? It was dude, I think Mario's got a foot out the door. He started getting asked about it, and he certainly did. And then he had an all-time awkward press conference before that bowl game against Oklahoma, I want to say, where it was hey, are you re-signing with Oregon? And he was oh, I think my agent's working on something. No further questions. And it was brutally obvious he was lying. The way to prevent all that is to make it so that you can't interview coaches until after the season ends. Let's institute that tomorrow. How do we not have that in place? That one I'm very black and white on. Okay, let me get to the final overall take here before I get to the Fox schedule. And with the Fox schedule, I'm just going to list it out and have some fun and be oh, that game seems fun. Okay, if you put the portal window in June, right after the academic semester ends, that helps everyone. I don't know anyone who would disagree with that. You can go through spring ball and find out where you are on the depth chart. Basically, if you're a receiver competing for playing time, you don't have to decide to dip out in December on your team. You can go through spring ball and be like, okay, now that the season's over and these guys have left and I've gotten better and I've trained and I've worked with the new quarterback or the returning quarterback, like, where am I truly at on this team? Instead, you're like kind of guessing mid-season before a playoff run, before everyone obviously on that team moves on to the NFL. Like, you're just kind of guessing, man. And, like, obviously you have an idea. And, yes, I know coaches sit down with players and say, hey, like Parker Livingston, famous example last year, hey, we're going to go get Cam Coleman from Auburn. We're buying him off Auburn. This is where we sit with your NIL deal. And he says, oh, damn, all right, I'm going to go to Oklahoma now. Like, it's just, and that happens in, like, December, like, mid-season. The off-season and the postseason are literally at the same time right now in college football in December and January. That's a big problem. One of the two simple fixes here. Number one, you can't interview coaches, and coaches can't interview until after the national title game. Very simple fix. Number two, the portal window is not January 2nd through the 16th where everyone's getting crammed in. It's in June. You take a breath. You go through your spring portal. Or you go through your spring practice. You find out where you are on the depth chart after your spring game. That makes spring practice even more competitive, by the way. Right now with spring practice, your roster's already set. Like, you are competing for playing time, but your roster's already set. If you go through spring practice, but you know that you might have to enter the portal, A, you're competing your ass off for a starting spot. And B, if you don't get a starting spot and you do want to leave, then you can. And you enter the portal. The reason I say June is because that's the end of the academic semester or quarter, depending on where you're at. I keep pausing for a second because Oregon's on the quarters. We would have winter quarter and spring quarter, but a lot of these schools are on semesters. So say it's June, which is a total downtime in college football. That is when the portal opens, January 2nd through, call it the 14th or the 16th. You can have 2 weeks, January 2nd through the 16th. You know where you stand after spring ball, and if you want, you can dip. And then summer rosters and fall rosters are completely set. And then you go into fall with a clear head, and you're like, all right, this is my new team, or I decided to come back, and away you go. That just seems like such a simple solution. Right now, we're just cramming so much into January and December of like, oh man, like the wide receiver 3 or 4 on a playoff team is like, should I leave? Because I mean, these guys may or may not come back. These receivers in front of me may or may not come back next year, and I might get a better deal. This is essentially the Parker Livingston example. Might get a better deal somewhere else. And you're thinking about that in the middle of preparations for a playoff game. I mentioned the coaching example with Stein and Lupoy. That should never in a million years happen. Will Stein clearly had a foot out the door into Kentucky. How could he not? He needed to GM and portal. He needed to get a starting quarterback for Kentucky. Okay, so he was recruiting Kenny Minchie and doing sit downs with the local news in Lexington. Seriously, he was. And he was probably in South Bend sitting down with Minchie, or if Minchie was living with his family somewhere, probably flew there to sit down with him. And then he was like, oh, by the way, all right, how do I game plan against Aiden Fisher and D'Angelo Pons and Bryant Haynes and Stephen Wyatt and all these great players for the Indiana team? Like, I don't know, man. That just seems so simple to me. Like, make the portal in June, go through spring ball. You don't have to cram anything in December and January. And then after spring ball, you have honest evaluations with your coaches, and from there, away you go. It seems so simple to me, and I hope that made sense. But you go through spring ball, you get told if you're starting or not, or where you are exactly on the depth chart, and then you can enter the portal or not for 2 weeks, and then after January or June 16th, your roster's totally set for the fall and for the season, and you're locked in, and then you're not scrambling to find some way into a summer semester if you're a student because. There's summer school, but that's a lot easier to get into than squeezing into a January I mean, and again, I know the argument we didn't come here for school, Cardale Jones, but some people did, and it's just easier that way. Like, man, it makes all the sense in the world to have the portal in June. So that's that. Okay, and then just for fun, wanted to run through the Fox Friday Night College Football schedule that was released within the last week. I know it's gotten some backlash from fans of like, hey man, we don't want to have to travel for those Friday nighters, or it's tougher for our teams. I personally really like a midweek college football game. I mean, I'm obsessed. Listen, folks, I am obsessed, so I'll watch a Tuesday night Sun Belt game. I mean, absolutely feed it to me. I will say I don't love like marquee games being on Friday nights. I think those are meant for Saturdays, but I do like the occasional, like especially back when ESPN really did a ton of midweek Thursday nighters that weren't like American games. Still love the American. Been to many of those Thursday nighters. UTSA Temple, been to it. UTSA blowing out Tulane last year. I was in the building. John Summerall yelling at UTSA's coach saying that they pipe in fake crowd noise. That was hysterical. And by the way, they do. As someone who's been to the UTSA Alamo Dome many times for a college football game, there's a lot of fake crowd noise in there. There really aren't many people in there. Good band, really good band. There aren't a lot of folks in there. They're definitely piping in fake crowd noise because it's loud as hell in there. And I get that it's a dome, but it is loud as hell in there. There's fake crowd noise. I'll go on the record and say that. Okay. Jeff Traylor was the guy's name. It was really funny. Longtime great UTSA coach. So here are the games on Friday night on Fox for this upcoming year. Fresno State at USC. I like it. Missouri at Kansas. Houston at Texas Tech. Northwestern at Indiana. Penn State at Northwestern. Iowa at Washington. Washington at Purdue. Nebraska at Illinois. Illinois at UCLA. Oregon at Michigan State. West Virginia at Utah. And then the Mountain West Championship. Cody Campbell, Texas Tech's billionaire booster, doesn't love it. To that, I would say you're at home against Houston. It's not like you're going on the road against Oregon on a Friday night. But, yeah, I mean, that'll be kind of a sneaky tough game for Oregon, man. Oregon at Michigan State. That's coming off, by the way, back-to-back games against Ohio State and Michigan. I don't know. I feel like the ESPN games that were Thursday nighters, I'm thinking like Pitt against Virginia, like number 2 West Virginia going on the road and losing at Pitt. Like those epic Thursday nighters, I swear, whenever you have a ranked team on the road against an unranked team in college football, many times it's the unranked team at home that pulls off the upset. So I think this will lead to some upsets. You get the border war, Missouri at Kansas there. I guess upset alert here based on that Hiefield methodology. Oregon at Michigan State would be a potential upset. Illinois at UCLA on a Friday night, potential upset. Washington at Purdue. Man, if Purdue pulls that off, or more like if Washington loses, yikes. Penn State at Northwestern on a Friday night. I want to say that's going to be the first game at the new Ryan Field as well. West Virginia at Utah, that wouldn't be an upset. But anyways, Fox put that out, and I just wanted to give you guys that rundown of those games. So again, for Friday night, this year in college football, Fresno State at USC, shades of the Reggie Bush reversal field. It's always awesome when Fresno State plays at USC. They've played at USC a couple times since that game, since that moment. But Fresno State at USC, Mizzou at Kansas, Houston at Texas Tech, Northwestern at Indiana, Penn State at Northwestern, Iowa at Washington, Washington at Purdue, Nebraska at Illinois, Illinois at UCLA, Oregon at Michigan State, and West Virginia at Utah. All right, hey, thanks for listening to the pod, and we'll see you next time.